They say betrayal hurts the most when it comes from those closest to you. I used to think that was just something people said to sound dramatic. Until it happened to me. My name is Lena. I'm 30 years old, a registered nurse, and for most of my adult life, I've been the backbone of my family, financially, emotionally, in every possible way. I paid off our dad's medical bills. I helped my younger sister finish school. I even covered rent more times than I can count. But none of that mattered when it came down to it. I was engaged to Ethan, a quiet, kind man I thought I'd grow old with. We were supposed to get married this fall. I thought I had it all. Until the night I opened our home security footage and watched my fiancé kissing my little sister. Right there in my living room. And the worst part, my mother told me to forgive them. Growing up, my mother always had a phrase she loved to repeat, "Lena, you're the strong one. Your sister just needs a little more help." At first, I believed her. I was the eldest, after all. I got good grades, didn't talk back, and started working part-time as soon as I could. I helped cook dinner when mom worked late and made sure my sister, Chloe, brushed her teeth and got to bed on time. I became the second parent long before I was old enough to legally vote. Chloe was different. She was bubbly, flirtatious, and impulsive. She dropped out of college halfway through her sophomore year, saying it wasn't aligned with her spirit. She had talent, sure, especially with photography, but she never followed through on anything. Every few months, she had a new dream, a new boyfriend, and a new crisis. And somehow, every time, I was the one expected to help pick up the pieces. When did she wreck her car? Because she was texting while driving. I took out a loan for the deductible. When she couldn't make rent after quitting her barista job on a whim, I covered it for 3 months. When did she want to find herself? By traveling to Bali. Guess who paid for the ticket? Mom always justified it by saying Chloe had a sensitive soul. That she'd eventually grow into herself if we just supported her enough. But support never seemed to flow in both directions. When I worked 14-hour night shifts during the peak of COVID, no one offered to make me dinner or even ask if I was okay. When I bought my first car, used, with a dented bumper, my mom asked why I didn't get something nicer, like Chloe's Jeep. The Jeep I'd co-signed, by the way. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself that family meant sacrifice, that one day it would all be worth it. And then Ethan came into my life. We met at a hospital fundraiser. He was a high school English teacher who volunteered to help organize books for the children's ward. He was thoughtful and gentle in a way I wasn't used to. When we started dating, he didn't flinch at my long shifts or erratic schedule. He even brought me homemade soup after my double shifts, always with a little note tucked inside the lid. I fell for him fast, maybe because he was the first person who ever asked me, "But what do you want, Lena?" We dated for 3 years before getting engaged. My family was thrilled, at first. My mother said, "Finally, a man who knows how to appreciate a good woman." But I should have known something was off when, a few months into the engagement, the compliments shifted. Mom started saying things like, "Ethan and Chloe have such great chemistry," or "Chloe always lights up around Ethan." I brushed it off. Chloe was naturally outgoing. Ethan was just polite. But over time, something in me started to ache. Every family gathering turned into a performance where Chloe dominated the spotlight, and Ethan watched with a little too much attention. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. I was just finally starting to see what had always been there. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Chloe had always been the center of attention, loud, expressive, and charming, and Ethan was just being polite, friendly, maybe even brotherly. That's what I wanted to believe. But then little things started stacking up. During Sunday dinners, Ethan and Chloe would always find themselves in some deep-side conversation, their heads tilted toward each other, whispering and laughing while I cleared plates or checked the roast. If I walked into the room unexpectedly, they'd fall silent. Sometimes Chloe would glance at me with a weird smile, half smug, half guilty. One evening, I came home from a 12-hour shift to find them both in my kitchen. Ethan had let Chloe in because she wanted to surprise me with dinner. Except dinner was barely started. They were sitting on the countertop, drinking wine. Ethan's shirt was unbuttoned halfway down, like he'd been relaxing for a while. "Hey, babe," Chloe said cheerfully. "We figured we'd wait for you before eating. Hope you don't mind. We started without you." She gestured to the wine. I stood there, sweaty, tired, and still in scrubs, while they laughed at some joke I'd apparently missed. When I mentioned it to Ethan later, how it felt a little off, he laughed. "She's your sister, Lena. You're overthinking it." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, for a while. But more moments followed. At a bridal fitting, Chloe showed up wearing white. "Oh, relax." She laughed when the consultant gently suggested she change. "I'm not trying to upstage anyone." Later that week, I caught Ethan texting under the covers. When I asked who it was, he tilted the phone away from me and said, "Just some of the guys from work." But I saw the screen light up again minutes later, and I caught a glimpse of the name. Chloe. That night, I barely slept. My mind spun in circles, telling me I was being crazy. That Ethan loved me. That Chloe would never. Still, I decided to test something. The following weekend, I planned a quick getaway for Ethan and me. A little cabin just 2 hours away. No signal, no distractions, just the two of us. But as I told him about it, his face tightened. "This weekend," he asked. "Chloe's having that art gallery opening thing, remember?" I told her I'd come. "I don't remember that," I said. He paused. "Well, it's important to her. She's nervous." I said I'd support her. I blinked. "You're turning down a weekend away with your fiancé to go to my sister's art show." He hesitated. "It's not like that. I just don't want to let her down." Let her down. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded and walked out of the room. That night, I checked the footage from our security camera system, the one I'd installed months ago after a break in 2 streets over. I hadn't looked at the recordings in weeks, but something inside me was screaming now. I scanned through the previous Saturday when I'd been at an overnight shift. I fast-forwarded through the footage, watching the timestamp roll by, until a familiar figure appeared on the porch at 8:37 p.m. Chloe, in heels, wearing the same red dress I'd seen crumpled in the laundry the next morning. Ethan opened the door. He kissed her on the cheek. Then they went inside, and the camera blinked off. Just like that. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick for the first time in over a year and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a bitter cup of coffee. The security footage had shut off minutes after Chloe entered. That wasn't automatic. It had to be disabled manually. I checked the app. The entire recording between 8:40 p.m. and midnight was missing. Deleted. Ethan was the only other person with access. It could have been a coincidence. A glitch. But my gut was done making excuses. I grabbed Ethan's tablet from the bookshelf. He barely used it, just for Netflix and emails. But he'd left it logged in, and when I opened the iMessage app, it only took 1 second to find them. Hundreds of messages. Chloe's name at the top. My stomach turned. I couldn't look away. Flirty texts. Photos I'll never be able to unsee. Videos. Hotel confirmations. Voice memos. Plans to meet when I was working night shifts or picking up overtime. One message from Chloe Reed. "I hate pretending like I don't know how good you are in bed when we're at Sunday dinner." Another from Ethan said, "Lena would never know. She doesn't look at me that way anymore." I didn't cry. I just sat there shaking, absorbing every word. They had used my schedule, my long hours helping strangers, to create a timeline for betrayal. And the money, that was the next blow. I checked our joint account. Over $6,000 has been missing over the last few months. Pulled in cash withdrawals and Venmo transfers to Chloe. Descriptions like studio rental and emergency dental. All lies. I pulled up Chloe's Instagram and saw it all: the beach trip, the fancy hotel room, and the spa she tagged. Photos Ethan wasn't in, but clearly was there. Then, something worse. I found an email thread between Chloe and my mother. Subject line, read Ethan. The first email was from Chloe. "Mom, I feel so guilty sometimes. Lena doesn't deserve this." My mother's reply, "Sweetheart, you're following your heart. Lena has always been so closed off. Maybe this is what she needs to finally loosen up." There it was. The validation. The casual cruelty. The decades of favoritism that had always been subtle, now typed out in black and white. Another email followed. "Don't worry about her feelings. Ethan clearly loves you. Lena was never really romantic, more of a caretaker. She'll land on her feet. You and Ethan are electric together." I wanted to vomit. That was my mother, writing off my pain like it was a necessary inconvenience, dismissing my relationship, my future, as collateral damage in her twisted narrative that Chloe was the daughter who deserved more. I sat in silence for a long time. No anger, no sobbing breakdown, just silence. Then, finally, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream or beg or demand answers. I knew exactly how that would go. They'd spin the story. Say it was a misunderstanding, that I was too cold, too unavailable, and too focused on work. That they didn't mean for it to happen. I could hear it already. It was just one time. "You've been so distant, Lena. Chloe didn't plan it. Maybe you were never really in love with Ethan. You're overreacting." No. This time, they wouldn't get a chance to speak first. This time, I would control the story. Over the next week, I played the part. I smiled when Ethan made coffee in the morning. I kissed him goodbye at the door. I even sat next to him on the couch and watched a Netflix documentary while his phone buzzed. Probably from her. I wanted them to think I didn't know. That I was still the Lena they had always underestimated. The reliable one. The one who looked the other way. Who kept the peace. But underneath that calm exterior, I was moving with purpose. I compiled everything. screenshots, bank records, emails. I printed the messages between Ethan and Chloe. I printed the emails between Chloe and my mother. I even included the Instagram photos, just in case anyone forgot. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called for a full family dinner. It was Chloe's birthday that weekend. I suggested we celebrate early. Nothing fancy, just a home-cooked meal at Mom's. Just family. I said sweetly over the phone, like the old days. My mother was thrilled. Yes, Chloe will love that. And you can announce more wedding updates too. I forced a laugh. Oh, I definitely have some updates. I spent the next 3 days organizing everything into folders, one for each person, labeled, color-coded. I even bought a small USB drive for my dad, knowing he'd want to verify the evidence. He always thought he was the logical one. When the evening came, I arrived 10 minutes early. The dining table was already set. Candles, champagne flutes. My mom had even made her famous pot roast. Ethan arrived 5 minutes later. Chloe walked in just after, wearing a tight red dress and too much perfume. She kissed Ethan on the cheek right in front of me. I smiled. We sat down. Talked about nothing. The weather, work. Some cousin is getting married. Then, just as everyone was laughing over a shared childhood memory, I cleared my throat. I have something I want to share, I said, reaching into my tote bag. 4 folders, 1 USB. I placed each one gently on their respective plates. My mother furrowed her brows. What's this? A gift, I said. The truth. For a moment, no one moved. Then Chloe opened hers first. She gasped. Ethan's hand froze on his wine glass. My dad unfolded the email printouts slowly, reading with increasing horror. My mother flipped to the bank statements and dropped the folder like it had burned her. What is this? She demanded. I leaned back in my chair. Evidence of what's been going on behind my back, of what you've all known and encouraged, Ethan and Chloe's affair, the stolen money, the lies, and you, Mom. Your emails, your enabling, your little pep talks about how I'd land on my feet. Chloe's face turned white. It's not, she started. I cut her off. Don't insult me with excuses. Ethan's voice was hoarse. Lena, I was going to tell you. You weren't, I said quietly. You were going to marry me and keep sleeping with my sister. Or worse, you were going to marry her. Once I'd finished paying for the venue, of course. Silence. Then my mother spoke. We never meant for it to go this far, she said, as if that made it better. We just thought you were so busy, and Ethan and Chloe, well, they have a connection. I looked at her with something colder than hatred. You raised me to clean up after everyone. To give. To forgive. To work double shifts so Chloe could have options. But you never, not once, stood up for me when I was the one who needed protecting. My father rubbed his temples. Let's just talk about this rationally. No, I said. You don't get to rationalize betrayal. I stood up. I've canceled the wedding, the venue, the dress, the catering, everything. The vendor's already confirmed. I also closed the joint account. Don't worry. I left enough in there to cover the engagement photos. You know, the ones where Ethan was smiling like he hadn't just slept with my sister the night before. Chloe burst into tears. Ethan sat frozen. My mother looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. I took one last breath. You all made your choices. This dinner was just a courtesy, so that none of you can ever say, I didn't give you the chance to look me in the eye when I walked away. And with that, I picked up my coat, pushed in my chair, and walked to the door. No one followed me. No one dared. The air behind me was thick with shame, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying any of it. In the days after the dinner, I felt strangely still. Not sad. Not angry. Just still, like I'd been swimming against a current for so long that the moment I stopped, I forgot what it felt like to simply float. Ethan sent messages, apologies, long paragraphs that danced around the word, sorry, without ever truly saying it. One morning, I found a bouquet of lilies on my doorstep, my least favorite flower, which told me everything I needed to know. Chloe called me once. I let it ring until her voice vanished into the silence. My mother left voicemails. They started off condescending. I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Then, guilt-ridden. She's still your sister, Lena. We're still your family. Then desperate. You're making this harder on everyone. But I'd made my decision. I packed my things into boxes over the course of a weekend. Clothes, medical books, and a few heirlooms that didn't come with emotional landmines. Everything else, I left behind. I gave notice at the hospital the following Monday. My manager hugged me tightly. Are you sure? She asked. You're one of the best we have? I'm sure, I said. But thank you for seeing me. 2 weeks later, I started over. A hospital in a new city, bigger, faster paced, but somehow less heavy. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and no memories attached. The rent was higher, but it was worth it just to wake up and feel peace instead of pressure. The first thing I bought for the new place, a couch I actually liked, Not beige, not practical. A deep navy blue velvet piece I'd always thought was too much for my old life. Now I realized I was allowed to have things just because they made me happy. I got a cat. Her name is Olive. She doesn't care about anyone's approval. I admire her for that. Some nights, I'd curl up with her, drink tea, and reread the printouts I'd brought from the dinner. Not out of spite, but as a reminder of what I walked away from, of who I used to be. I started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I finally had space to put myself first. And in that space, I found something terrifying and beautiful. I didn't miss them. Not the chaos, not the pressure, not the silence I used to fill with excuses for other people's behavior. I realized I had spent most of my life being loyal to people who would never bleed for me. And now I was loyal to myself. I began saying no. To favors. To family friends who called, just to check in. To former colleagues who asked if I'd reconsider moving back. Each no felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a life I was finally building for myself. I started writing again, small blog posts at first, then longer pieces about nursing, about burnout, and about boundaries. To my surprise, people read them. Some even messaged to say my words had helped them leave toxic relationships or set limits with their families. That's when I realized healing is quiet, but it's powerful. It's not a fireworks show. It's a candle being lit in a room that's been dark for too long. A few months in, I took my first solo trip to Lisbon. I sat by the river with a glass of wine and wrote in my journal, "I am not the daughter who stays and keeps forgiving. I am the woman who walks away and thrives." That night, I walked the cobbled streets without checking my phone, without waiting for anyone's approval, and without apologizing for existing. It was the most free I'd ever felt. It was almost a full year before I heard from them again. By then, I had built a new rhythm: morning shifts at the hospital, quiet evenings with Olive, and weekends spent exploring flea markets, trying unfamiliar food, or walking by the harbor with music in my ears and no one to answer to. Then, one Thursday morning, I got a message request on Facebook from a name I hadn't seen in years: Aunt Sylvia. "Hi, sweetheart. I know things have been messy, but your mother's been asking about you. Chloe's going through a really hard time. I think she could use her big sister right now." I stared at the message, rereading the words, "big sister," like they still meant something. I didn't respond. The next day, a letter arrived at my building, handwritten, with no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. It began with, "Dear Lena," and ended with, "Why need your help?" Turns out, the fairy tale didn't last. Ethan left Chloe 6 months after I walked out, right around the time their savings ran dry. According to my aunt, Chloe had gotten pregnant. Ethan denied paternity. A DNA test confirmed he was the father, but by then he'd already vanished to another state. He wasn't paying child support. Chloe had no job, no degree, no partner. And my mother, she had taken out a personal loan to help cover Chloe's rent and baby expenses. Then another. Now their house was at risk, and the baby, my niece, was being dragged into the chaos. That's when they remembered me. That's when I became useful again. They wanted me to come home, to forgive, to be the bigger person. So I agreed to meet, not because I planned to help, but because I wanted them to see, with their own eyes, the woman I'd become without them. We met at a small cafe halfway between cities. I arrived early, ordered a tea, and sat by the window. 10 minutes later, they walked in. My mother and Chloe. I almost didn't recognize them. Chloe had lost that effortless glow she used to weaponize. Her eyes were tired, her posture slouched, and the designer purse she once flaunted was replaced with a diaper bag worn at the edges. My mother looked older too. Gray streaks she hadn't bothered to dye, deep lines between her brows. "Lena," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I didn't offer it. We sat in awkward silence until Chloe finally spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For everything. For hurting you. For sleeping with Ethan. For lying." I sipped my tea. "And," I asked. She blinked. "And for letting it go on as long as it did. I thought he loved me." "You thought he loved whoever paid the bills," I said calmly. "But I'm sure he told you it was different this time." My mother leaned in. "Chloe is trying. She's doing the best she can, but it's hard. She's alone, with a child." "So was I," I said, except I didn't have the luxury of collapsing. I was expected to hold everyone up. "You gave her excuses. You gave me expectations." "Lena, please," she whispered. "This isn't about the past anymore. There's a baby involved now. She needs support. We need help. Just until we're back on our feet." I looked at Chloe. Where was this sisterhood when you were sneaking into my house behind my back? When you were wearing my engagement ring and sleeping in my bed like it meant nothing?" She looked down. No answer. I leaned back and folded my arms. "You didn't come here for closure. You came here because you thought I'd still play the role. Still say yes. Still rescue the ones who sunk the ship. My mother tried again. You've always been the strong one. And you've always taken advantage of that. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain envelope. Chloe's eyes lit up. My mother let out a small breath of relief, until I slid it across the table and said, "This isn't money. It's a letter. It says that I forgive myself for letting you use me for so long." Then I stood. "You can keep the envelope. Just don't open it expecting anything else." "Lena," my mother said, her voice cracking. "She's your niece." "No," I said softly. "She's your granddaughter. You figure it out." I walked to the door. Chloe called after me once, quietly. But I didn't look back, because the Lena they used to know would have stopped. She would have hesitated. She would have given in, convinced herself that blood meant something sacred. But the Lena they were seeing now, she wasn't built for bending anymore. She was built for walking away and never returning.